The South African Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, will make his first budget speech on Wednesday since he was reinstated to that post in December last year. Mr. Gordhan's speech will, among other topics, feature dwindling revenues, commodity prices plunge, drought concerns and slowing economic growth. All are key concerns and need to be sorted out. With debt rising and Standard & Poor's threatening to cut the nation's credit rating from BBB-, that's the lowest investment grade, into junk, Mr. Gordhan has very little room to maneuver. At the same time, businesses and investors are looking to him to restore policy confidence, especially after President Jacob Zuma damaged sentiment in December last year when he replaced his finance minister at the time, Mr. Nene, with a little-known lawmaker. Mr. Zuma later on backtracked on that decision 4 days later and reappointed Mr. Gordhan to a post he'd held between 2009 and 2014 after both the rand and government bonds went down.
This budget's actually being watched by the international investor community. Minister Gordhan, at this point in time, has to really illustrate a strong willed approach to the budget to make the right structural changes and to communicate a degree of both realism as well as political will in terms of getting the right policies across the line.
Basic stuff will not be impacted. But obviously there is a political angle to it. Because of the elections, we might not see the increase in VAT. But in the long run, we are going to see the increase.
Let's head over live to Johannesburg. Angela Kupla is part of the team. They will be covering the story in detail tomorrow. Angela, preventing a downgrade is essentially the main agenda for tomorrow's budget speech. What are the top three things we should expect to hear from Mr. Gordhan tomorrow?
Well, number one, we're going to see tax increases. They're probably going to target the middle sector or the middle class and the upper class. That's almost a shoo-in. We're not going to see any increases in terms of the lower income levels. There's not going to be any tax increases there. Social grants are definitely going to be increased to deal with inflation. Then on the expenditure side, we're going to see some cuts, but we'll see job freezes in the civil service. We're not going to see any cuts to the size of that public sector. Then on fiscal discipline, we're probably going to see SOE or the state-owned entities focus on profitability. It's something that Gordhan's been pushing for a while. And we may likely hear about appointments from the private sector into those SOEs to make them more profitable in that way. As we have seen just recently with the appointment of a private sector CEO into the post office. He's an ex-asset manager and a business leader. Talk of selling of the state-owned entities, we're probably not going to hear anything there just yet. Rama?
Indeed, it should be interesting to see exactly how SOEs like SAA, for example, will be dealt with. Let's take a contrarian argument here. Given the amount of economic damage already done over the last couple of years and the credibility lost by the government, December, of course, being a highlight of that, is a downgrade to junk essentially a done deal? Over and done with, done and dusted, it's just a question of formalizing it.
Well, the short answer is probably yes. It's unlikely that Gordhan can do anything with this budget speech tomorrow except signal intent. The ratings agencies will want to see practical, measurable changes, and this will take time. So the question is, will the agencies hold back on their decision? Either way, it's unlikely. It's more likely that they're going to take an aggressive and not a passive view because they have to kind of save some face based on what they did in 2008. And of course, just yesterday, President Zuma put his foot in it again by making comments about the fact that Van Rooyen, the finance minister he appointed in fired finance minister Nene's shoes, was the best qualified to fill that position at the time. So he's kind of not really playing as nicely as he should be playing right now, Raman.
There's been talk about a potential amnesty for cash funds held offshore to be repatriated into the country. How would such a plan work? And how much revenue could it, at least in theory, raise?
Well, if Gordhan does announce this amnesty tomorrow, all the high net worth individuals in the country and those that are domiciled here will submit their balance sheet of offshore funds that they haven't previously declared. And if the National Treasury likes what they're hearing, they then approve the declaration and then the funds can start moving. The issue here really is, or the fly in the ointment, is that there could be some onerous interest charges that could be applied to that money. The capital will probably still be in place, but it's about the interest. So there's going to be some negotiation that's going to be happening around there. It's been done before. In fact, Gordhan did it during his last stint as finance minister, and he raised several hundred million rand at that point. This time round, he's hoping to raise between $300 and $400 million. Whether he's going to reach that number or not kind of remains to be seen. Raman?
Indeed. Let's get back to Mr. Zuma. He re-emphasized the need to properly implement the National Development Plan in his State of the Nation address, very controversial, earlier this month. But does the ANC as a party have a plan to convince these skeptical allies, NUMSA, COSATU and so on, to back the plan? And if they don't, are they willing and able to go it alone, especially with local government elections coming up?
Well, the alliance partners here, specifically COSATU and its affiliated unions, will be easier to convince. The ANC has been hard at work here already. In fact, it's just put on hold the Tax Amendments Act, which is going to tackle some of the pension issues for some of those government employees. That's been seen by some analysts as a concession just before those municipal elections later this year. In terms of NUMSA, well, they walked away from COSATU about a year and a half ago, and there's several parties that have now joined NUMSA to form a new confederation. We're talking several 100,000 members here, and it's probably most probable that they're not going to vote for the ANC. This new group has fundamental ideological differences with the ANC policy, and they can't be resolved by talks or by concessions. Raman?
Indeed, we'll absolutely be there and see exactly how this plays out. Thank you for that. That's Angelo Coppola live in Johannesburg. As I mentioned earlier, part of the team that will be covering the budget speech later on tomorrow. You can expect all the details and the numbers right here on Global Business.